Search every GTA game explained, and you get dozens of videos full of mistakes, wrong cities, made-up characters, facts obviously invented by a language model. Scroll the comments and they're full of people fact-checking every error. So no rushed plot summary this time. This is the verified history behind every Grand Theft Auto. The bug that accidentally invented the series, the scandal that reached the British Parliament, and the billions Rockstar made off of it. Grand Theft Auto didn't start as a crime game. At DMA Design, in a cramped office above a former fish and chip shop in Dundee, the project was called Race and Chase. You played a cop chasing criminals, while the publisher nearly canceled the project multiple times because it simply wasn't fun. Then the police AI broke. A programming error made officers go completely berserk and ram everything in sight instead of arresting anyone. Instead of fixing that bug, the developers built an entire game around it. You now played the criminal yourself, viewed from above, across 3 cities clearly modeled on American originals: Liberty, San Andreas, and Vice City. Missions came in through a pager, and the more chaos you caused, the more points you scored. The game ran off CD-ROM, unusual at the time, which made a radio system possible, where you could switch between genres like hip-hop, industrial, and funk while driving, a small detail that would go on to define the whole series' vibe. Even before release, a member of the British House of Lords condemned the game out loud after a publicity campaign that aimed precisely at stirring that outrage. It worked. 3 million copies sold by the year 2000, and a billion-dollar franchise born out of a glitch nobody planned. The first expansion moved that same chaos to 1969 London, and to this day, it remains the only GTA ever set outside the United States. Same engine, same rules, but now with bowler hats, vintage cars, and swinging London atmosphere instead of American cities. It didn't change the core of the game, but it proved something important for a tiny team out of Dundee. GTA could be set anywhere, in any era, using the same formula, without touching the engine itself. That lesson wouldn't be picked up seriously again for decades. Right after came London, 1961. Free for anyone who already owned 1969. New missions, a new map, a handful of extra vehicles, still in that same retro British style. It even included a multiplayer mode, at a time when multiplayer was still fairly rare in games. Almost nobody remembers this expansion today, but technically, it's the very first GTA with multiplayer. Small detail, big precedent. GTA 2 moved everything to the futuristic Anywhere City and added a system that feels surprisingly modern for a 1999 game. You picked a gang to work for, from the Yakuza to the Zaibatsu to religious cults. Every favor you did for one gang automatically made you an enemy of the rest. Loyalty was purely business, nothing personal. The game opened with a live-action intro in which protagonist Claude Speed gets shot in the head, and it's never treated as canon by the series itself. Still, GTA 2 proved something crucial before the jump to 3D. The formula could grow beyond just chaos without direction. It could also carry systems and choices. Between GTA 2 and the next installment, something happened behind the scenes that mattered just as much as anything on screen. In March 1998, Take-Two Interactive bought the assets of the doomed BMG Interactive, the publisher behind the first 2 GTAs. Brothers Sam and Dan Houser, who worked at BMG, moved to New York, and in December 1998, launched their own label within Take-Two, Rockstar Games. Sam Houser became president, Dan became head writer. From that point on, it wasn't DMA Design but Rockstar on the box, and the series finally had a publisher built entirely around Grand Theft Auto. Then comes the year everything tipped over. GTA 3 threw away the top-down camera and put the series fully in 3D for the first time. You played Claude, a silent criminal left for dead by his own girlfriend during a bank robbery, who escaped prison and worked his way up through Liberty City's underworld for mobsters, the Yakuza, and anyone paying. The city felt alive for the first time. Pedestrians with their own routines, traffic, changing weather, radio stations that commented on what was happening in the world. The game was violent and controversial enough to alarm politicians again, but this time, nobody could stop it. GTA 3 turned open-world games into a mainstream genre instead of a curiosity, and the series went from cult hit to global phenomenon in a single release. There was no going back. The release was originally scheduled for early October 2001, but after the 9/11 attacks just weeks earlier, Rockstar pushed the date back 3 weeks to adjust references and details that hit too close to reality. Even under those circumstances, the game immediately became the best-selling title of the year. Vice City moved that energy to the 1980s. Bright colors, loud shirts, and even louder crime. Tommy Vercetti was sent from Liberty City to handle a drug deal that immediately went sideways, and instead of going home, built his own empire mission by mission alongside biker gangs, rock musicians, and shady businessmen. Clearly inspired by Scarface and Miami Vice, the game mixed beachfront glamour with brutal violence on every corner. For the first time, the protagonist had a voice and plenty to say, instead of silently doing whatever you told him. Vice City didn't just become a map, it became a vibe, and Tommy Vercetti owned every street of it. The radio stations were packed with licensed music from exactly those years, from synth-pop to British new wave, and that soundtrack became just as defining to the game's identity for many players as the missions themselves. San Andreas took everything from Vice City and doubled it. The story of CJ, back in Los Santos after his mother's death with a broken gang and a fractured family, grew into an epic about loyalty, corrupt cops, and government conspiracies spread across 3 cities and an entire state. You could lift weights, eat burgers, change your haircut, and fly around with a jetpack, all in the same open world. With more than 38 square kilometers of playable space, it was, on release, the largest 3D world ever built for a game, a record that would only fall 9 years later to GTA 5. But the real scandal came in 2005, when a Dutch modder discovered hidden sexual content that had never actually been removed from the game's files, only disabled, the Hot Coffee mod. Within weeks, the Entertainment Software Rating Board pulled the rating back from mature to adults only. Major retail chains yanked the game off shelves en masse, and US senators demanded a federal investigation into the entire games industry. Rockstar had to release a clean, patched version to get the original rating back. To this day, San Andreas is the only GTA ever to receive an AO rating, and the only one that came that close to Congress. The radio stations, packed with West Coast hip-hop, funk, and talk show parodies, have since become nearly as iconic as CJ's story itself. GTA Advance came out that same year as San Andreas, but only on the Game Boy Advance, back to the familiar top-down view. It was a prequel to GTA 3 with tiny text, limited pixel graphics, and a protagonist named Mike that almost nobody remembers today. The cartridge simply couldn't handle the full 3D engine of the consoles. So the whole game was rebuilt around the original top-down style of the very first GTA, combined with the mission structure of the newer entries. Still, for players who wanted GTA in their pocket years before smartphones existed, this was the only option that actually existed. Liberty City Stories took us back to the streets of GTA 3, a few years earlier in the timeline. You played Tony Cipriani, a loyal soldier of the Leone family who, after years in hiding, has to earn respect all over again by doing dirty work, fighting rival gangs, and keeping his own bosses happy. To get the game running on a PSP, Rockstar ditched the renderware engine that had powered every earlier 3D GTA and built a brand new in-house engine specifically for the handheld's weaker hardware. The entire game had to fit on a disk of barely 1.8 gigabytes, so every asset was trimmed down to the bare essentials. The result was the first fully 3D GTA on a handheld, and it still felt like a full console experience. For the first time on GTA 3's map, you could also ride a motorcycle, which at the time was a small miracle, and immediately set the PSP version apart from its console siblings. Vice City Stories takes place 2 years before Tommy Vercetti's rise. Victor Vance is just trying to support his sick brother, but gets dishonorably discharged from the army after being set up, and slides through his friend Phil Cassidy into illegal arms dealing in the underworld of Vice City. Rockstar leads built on the technology from Liberty City stories, but had to rebuild the entire city of Vice City from scratch this time, including the ability to see the whole city at once from a plane in the sky. The map was expanded with extra interiors, jet skis, and even a system to build your own business empire. The tone ran darker than the original. Even the good guys get dirty here. It also remained the final chapter of the series' classic pre-HD era, and fans are still asking for a remaster to this day. GTA 4 ushered in the HD era. Nico Bellic arrived in Liberty City as an Eastern European immigrant chasing the American dream and found debt, betrayal, and a war-torn past that kept catching up with him instead. Nico took jobs from gangsters, politicians, and arms dealers, while the city looked darker and more realistic than ever. Rockstar left the old renderware engine behind for good and built its own engine, Rage, combined with a physics system called Euphoria, which for the first time made pedestrians collide and fall realistically instead of playing fixed animations. The game sold more than 6 million copies worldwide in its first week, and with over $300 million in day one sales, it set a record at the time for any form of entertainment, film included. Liberty City had never felt this heavy or this real, and for the first time, the choices you made actually had consequences. The Lost and Damned completely flipped the first major DLC for GTA 4, and was itself an experiment. It launched exclusively as a downloadable add-on instead of a separate disc, something almost unheard of at that scale at the time. You became Johnny Klebitz, vice president of a biker gang called The Lost, while Nico dealt with mob bosses elsewhere in the same city. Johnny's real fight wasn't against outsiders, but against his own gang, which was tearing itself apart from the inside through drugs, betrayal, and a president fresh out of rehab. Same city, completely different, greenier chaos, told from an entirely different angle. The Ballad of Gay Tony followed a few months later and turned those same gray streets into a neon playground. Luis Lopez, bodyguard and right-hand man to nightclub owner Gay Tony, helped his mother, managed VIP clubs, and fought the Russian mob, all in the same week. Parachutes, golf clubs, and jetpacks returned to the gameplay, and missions regularly ended with helicopters exploding over the city. Liberty City had never looked this expensive and this dangerous at the same time. Chinatown Wars did something no other GTA at that point dared to try. Cel-shaded graphics, back to a top-down view, built specifically for handheld touchscreens, with a full drug-dealing economy and touchscreen minigames for things like hot wiring cars. Hong Li, the spoiled son of a triad boss, arrived in Liberty City to deliver a family sword and got robbed within minutes, dragging him into a spiral of revenge and drug dealing. Despite scoring above 90 on Metacritic, at the time the highest-rated game ever released on the Nintendo DS, it sold commercially modestly, likely because players didn't immediately trust an art style so different from the rest of the series. Looking back, it's one of the smartest and most underrated GTAs ever made. And then GTA 5, at the time made with an estimated production and marketing budget of $265 million, the most expensive video game ever produced. 3 protagonists instead of 1. Michael, a retired bank robber with family problems. Franklin, a street-smart repo man looking for a better life. And Trevor, just Trevor. You could switch between them at any moment, plan heists, or just set Los Santos on fire for no reason at all, a structure no previous GTA had ever attempted. The game made roughly $800 million in its first 24 hours and crossed $1 billion within 3 days. At the time, the fastest entertainment product ever to hit that number, faster than any Hollywood film. But the real story started after that. GTA Online grew into a separate, constantly expanding world full of heists, races, and shark cards. and kept the game's revenue alive for more than a decade, long after most games had been forgotten. Even 13 years after release, that one mode alone still pulls in roughly $500 million a year, almost entirely from microtransactions, while only a small fraction of players actually spend money. Today, the count stands at more than 225 million copies of GTA 5 sold on its own, and more than $10 billion in total revenue for the franchise. The most profitable entertainment product ever made that didn't come out of a movie theater. 2021, 20 years after GTA 3, Rockstar released the Definitive Edition, remastered versions of GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas bundled together. It became one of the most disastrous launches in the series' history. The games were riddled with bugs, character models looked warped, and the PC version was pulled from the Rockstar store entirely within days, after it turned out unreleased music and unfinished source code had accidentally been left in the files. Players demanded refunds en masse. Rockstar issued a public apology and had to give the original classic versions away for free to anyone who'd already bought the bundle. Even 20 years later, this series could still surprise you, just not in a good way this time. And then there's GTA 6, which still hasn't come out at the time of recording. Early preparation began around 2014, shortly after GTA 5's release. But real development only started after Red Dead Redemption 2 in 2018. Rockstar kept everything under lock and key until a hacker leaked early development footage in 2022, something he was later convicted for. The first official trailer didn't arrive until December 2023 and broke the record for the most viewed non-music video on YouTube ever within 24 hours. The second trailer hit 475 million views across all platforms in a single day, more than any Hollywood trailer ever released. Rockstar has delayed it twice and is currently targeting November 19, 2026. If the history of this series teaches one thing, it's that every delay, every scandal, and every weird glitch eventually just became part of the story, and that players, despite all the criticism, keep coming back anyway. From a broken police AI to $10 billion in revenue. Subscribe because the next chapter's coming.